He walked away the very moment his newborn daughter cried, believing a child of the wrong gender was unworthy of acknowledgement. 22 years later, that very daughter returned, armed with evidence, intellect, and fury forged in silence, to topple a billion-dollar empire built on blood and tears. This was not merely revenge, but proof. Truth can be buried, yet it will bloom when watered with persistence and faith. The cry of a newborn echoed through the stark white room of Prentice Women's Hospital in Chicago. For many, it was the sound of a miracle, hope, and a new beginning. But for Zola Kestrel, it was nothing short of a curse. He stood at the doorway, his polished Italian leather shoes tapping against the cold tile. The sharp clicks reverberated through the corridor like a funeral march for what he considered a failure. A daughter. "Mr. Kestrel, please wait a moment." The nurse's voice called after him, urgent. Julian stopped, shoulders tight, but did not turn. "It's a boy, isn't it?" Silence fell, heavy as taut wire. The nurse, a middle-aged woman whose eyes had seen too much life and death, exhaled. "A healthy baby girl, Mr. Kestrel. She has your eyes." The words "have you eyes" made Julian shudder, but instead of turning back, he pulled a black credit card from his wallet, handing it to the nurse without looking at her. "Make sure she gets the best room. I have urgent business." "Sir, your wife is hemorrhaging. She needs—" "Tomorrow, my lawyer will bring papers. Have her sign within 48 hours and leave my house." His voice was as cold as the winter wind sweeping through the hospital windows. In room 614, Folake Adebayoradu Kestrel lay amid blood and tears. Her body trembled not from cold, but from the pain of 18 hours of labor. In her arms lay a baby girl, tiny, eerily silent, black eyes wide open, not crying, only staring at the ceiling as if she already knew she had been born into a world that rejected her. "She needs a transfusion immediately," said Dr. Carter, his voice both urgent and shaky. He had seen hundreds of births, but watching a mother on the brink of death while the father vanished made his hands tremble. "We need the husband's signature to proceed with surgery," a nurse reminded. The door burst open. Nike Adebayorikwo, Folake's younger sister, appeared in her nurse's uniform, dusted with snow. After her sister's panicked call, she had driven nearly 100 miles through a blizzard from Milwaukee. "I'll sign. I'm family. From now on, I'll be her only family." Nike lifted the baby from Folake's arms. The infant did not cry, only gazed with unfathomable eyes. Nike whispered, "What will her name be, sister?" Folake's lips barely moved, her voice faint as a dying breeze. "Zola. In Yoruba, it means the one who brings prosperity. She will rebuild from these ashes." Meanwhile, in a lavish penthouse on Lake Shore Drive, Julian popped open a bottle of Dom Perignon with his mistress, Morgana Voss, a sharp-eyed blonde whose belly was already swelling with pregnancy. "To our son," Morgana whispered, her eyes gleaming with calculation. "To the future of House Kestrel," Julian replied, though his smile never reached his eyes. His mind echoed his late father's words, the pharmaceutical tycoon. Sons carry the legacy, daughters only take another man's name. That night in Chicago, 2 children came into existence in opposing worlds, a girl cast aside, and a fetus celebrated as the heir. The next morning, lawyer Bradley Stevenson entered the ICU, where Folake lay pale, clinging to life among tubes and monitors. He placed a thick folder in front of her. "Mrs. Kestrel," Bradley began, masking discomfort at the sight of the frail, blood-stained woman. "Mr. Kestrel has agreed to provide financial support. You will receive $50,000 to start over." Nike snatched the papers, her eyes blazing. "Support? He has hundreds of millions, and he throws my sister scraps." Bradley sighed, slipping. "A child he doesn't want." "Get out," Nike roared. "Leave before I forget the Hippocratic Oath." But Folake, weak as she was, stopped her. "Give me the pen." Nike turned, stunned. "You're going to sign? There's one clause that must be added," Folake whispered. "Write that Julian Kestrel under no circumstances shall ever have custody of Zola." Bradley raised his brows. "That's unusual. He'll want to. One day, when Zola succeeds, he'll try to claim her. I know men like him. Write it. Reluctantly, the lawyer nodded. When Folake signed, her hand trembled so badly the ink bled like blood. At that exact moment, Zola, silent until now, suddenly wailed a sharp, unyielding cry, like an indictment hurled into the void. Nike shivered, whispering, "She knows. Somehow, she knows." 3 days before Zola's birth, while Folake was suffering through false labor, Julian had secretly transferred the $10 million inheritance from her father, a Nigerian diplomat, into a Cayman Islands account. The forged power of attorney, signed under sedation, had been notarized by Bradley. In just 48 hours, a fortune that could have changed the lives of mother and child became the seed capital of Kestrel Biopharma. And with that ruthlessness, Julian launched his billion-dollar empire. 2 days later, Folake was wheeled out of the hospital through the back entrance to avoid reporters. Nike rented a small apartment in Bronzeville, the south side of Chicago, where the old brick buildings seemed to bear the history of black struggle. As the car pulled away, Folake looked back, tears blurring her vision. In the place where she had nearly died giving birth, her husband had calculated assets. In the place where she had given life to her daughter, the man left nothing but absence. Nike clasped her hand. "We'll survive, sister." Folake lowered her gaze to Zola, sleeping peacefully. "No, Nike. We'll do more. We'll thrive. One day Julian will realize what he threw away." That night, in the bare apartment without curtains, a Nigerian lullaby floated softly. "Omomi, my daughter. You were born of abandonment, but you will not be abandoned. You were rejected by power, but you will become powerful. Sleep, Zola. Tomorrow, we begin to build." Her frail song drifted with the wind, slipping through thin walls, carried into the city glowing on the horizon. Chicago had no idea that tonight, a baby girl had been given a destiny, to become the scale of justice against the man who once deemed her worthless. That winter in Bronzeville was as cold as a warning. Wind from Lake Michigan whipped along rows of brownstone houses, slipping through window gaps long unrepaired. The apartment Nike rented sat on the top floor of a worn 3-story walk-up, the wooden stairs creaking with every step. On the landing, a faded poster about the Great Migration remained from a previous tenant, black silhouettes leaving the south, hands pulling suitcases, eyes fixed northward as if toward a promise. Inside the apartment, Zola slept in a wooden crib Nike had gotten from a co-worker at the hospital with a small carved star. Folake lay on her side on a sagging spring bed, eyes wide open in the dark. Each time she shut them, she heard again the doctor's urgency, the heart monitors beeping, and the door closing behind Julian. That closing was so stark it became an echo, as if life had veered with that slam. The next morning, Nike laid a thick stack of bills on the table: rent, electricity, heat, and diapers. "You rest," Nike said, her voice carrying the firmness of someone who'd been a nurse long enough to know gentleness was a luxury now. "I'm on nights at Street Luke's this week. I'll come by during the day to help. We'll make it work." "He won't come back," Folake said, more to say it than to mean it, to cut the last thread tying her to a hazy possibility. "And we don't need him." Nike poured hot water into a cup and dropped in a hibiscus tea bag, the air filled with a tart, sweet scent. "We don't." She looked at her sister, deep eyes, skin darkened by long nights, chin lifted in defiance. "But we need the truth." The truth arrived like a knife, sharp and cold, through a document Nike had printed from a hospital computer, something she shouldn't have done, but did anyway, for family. 2 weeks after the birth, when Zola had learned to smile in her sleep, Nike handed over copies of the wire transfers, $10 million moving out of Falake's inheritance fund into a web of Cayman Islands accounts through an LLC named Eco Minerals. Transaction date: 12/15 the day. Zola cried her first cry, the day Folake nearly died. "Is this my signature?" Folake touched the page, her fingers chilled. The slanted, careful but lifeless script sat on a notarized power of attorney, certified by Bradley Stevenson. She even recognized the raised seal, the law office's stamp, round and cold as an unblinking eye. "No," Nike said. I've known your signature since elementary school, the little hook on the A. It's not here. This is someone pretending, and they thought you'd never know. Folake laughed a sound like a violin string pulled too tight. They were half right. I almost didn't, but almost isn't forever. 3 months later, when her incision healed, Folake returned to school. When Zola slept, she sat beside a borrowed desk lamp and read, "Accounting 101, as if swallowing numbers into her blood. By day, she worked 2 cashier shifts at a Jewish family's grocery in Hyde Park. The kind owner gave her sandwiches on break and asked after Zola whenever she stopped by with the baby. She cleaned offices in the Loop at night, and blue rubber gloves gradually imprinted her hands with cleaning chemicals. One night, on the 28th floor of a glass tower, she was scrubbing a stovetop when the elevator doors opened. A man in a suit stepped out, talking on his phone as he passed. "No, we're not discounting glycostat," he said, voice dry as stone. "The poor will self-adjust." He walked on, not noticing the drip of cleanser running down her glove and falling to the floor like a bead of blood. Folake straightened, wiped her brow, and looked out the window at Chicago's sea of lights. Low-income people will self-adjust. Those words seeped into her skin like bleach. At home, Zola grew up between shifts. Sometimes she lay on the thin blanket Nike had brought from Nigeria, blue-flowered Ankara, following the bus lights of the number 3 line passing the window. The thin curtain puffed like a wave each time a bus went by. Folake played Yoruba lullabies her mother had once sung in Lagos. Nike tuned the radio to WBEZ so the baby could hear warm-voiced storytellers. In the quiet moments, the apartment could listen to Zola's heartbeat, quick, intense, as if she were already running and winning in her dreams. Bronzeville, poor as it was, always taught people how to stand tall. On Sundays, Pilgrim Baptist Church opened its doors. The choir's voices spilled into the street. Nike carried Zola there to let her listen. "Music heals," she said, "and gospel is our backbone." On the pews, mothers traded diapers, pens, advice, and stories of men who'd left, bills unpaid, babies teething. No one mentioned Zola Kestrel. No one needed to. Spring arrived with damp winds. Blackened snow patches thinned and slid into drains. Nike found a daycare that would assist Zola 2 blocks away, next to an African hair braiding shop. Every morning, Folake wrapped her gilet swiftly, tied Zola onto her back with cloth, as her mother had done in Lagos, and descended the wooden stairs. Men on the stoop greeted her with a half-joke, half-true "Morning, Queen." She smiled not at the title, but at the feeling of self-possession settling into her stride. At work, a customer glanced at Folake's name tag and asked, "How do I say your name?" "Folahk," she pronounced, each syllable clear, neither shortened nor Americanized. "It means loved by wealth, but I prefer to think of it as loved by true worth." The man laughed sheepishly. "Beautiful name, thank you." In the evenings, picking up Zola, Folake sat on an old wooden bench in the playground, watching her daughter kick chubby legs into the air, black eyes curious as sparrows hopped down to peck at crumbs. A little boy ran over and handed Zola a plastic rattle. Zola reached, lips pressed tight, then burst into laughter. That laugh, clear as shattering glass, made Folake blink, as if she'd just read a quiet prophecy. The child would laugh anyway. Back home in the cramped kitchen, Nike minced onions, peppers, and tomatoes, and tossed them into a sizzling pan. "Jollof rice tonight," she announced. "We're celebrating Zola rolling over. Do people celebrate that?" Folake laughed, but still pulled Zola close so the baby could slap the table and sniff the fragrant rice. "Every victory deserves a celebration," Nike said, half joking, eyes bright. "Especially for small warriors." Folake looked at her sister. "Thank you." Nike shrugged. "You do the same. And actually, Zola helps me too. Every time I feel tired, I remember there's a little one who needs this world to be less cruel." In the 6th month, a letter arrived, a thick envelope with a glossy Kestrel Biopharma logo. Touching the paper felt like touching a blade. She slit it cleanly, pulling out a stack notice of voluntary benefits, a sneering non-disclosure agreement, florid lines, wishing her a fresh start, and reminding her of her obligation to avoid the press. No Julian signature, just the cold stamp of legal. Nike snatched it, skimmed, then snorted. They think we'll be scared. Toss money like a bone, hoping the dog clamps its mouth and shuts up. But you're not a dog, and Zola doesn't eat bones. Folake folded the papers and placed them in a shoebox under the bed, where she kept everything connected to Julian. Evidence box, she joked. Then, more solemnly, she labeled it, the one who left. But on some nights, when she was exhausted and her eyes burned, she opened the box, not to read the documents, but to remind herself, it all happened. Not a nightmare, not a story. Truth, bitter as it was fuel. Truth lifted people to their feet again and again. On Zola's first birthday, Nike invited a few neighbors, Mrs. Jenkins from 2B, Mr. Jones, who played harmonica on the stoop, and Rosario from the corner salon. A small home-baked cake sat on the table, messily frosted in white, a crooked #1 candle stuck on top. Make a wish, Zola, Nike coaxed, then laughed at herself. All right, I'll wish for you. You'll learn everything you need to be free, and you'll never ask permission to exist. They sang Happy Birthday in the neighborhood way, offbeat but sincere. Zola slapped the cake, frosting smeared across her cheeks. She looked at everyone, seemed to consider something, and didn't cry. She just smiled. After the little party, when everyone had left, Folake sat by the window with sleeping Zola on her chest, her breath soft and even like small waves. Outside, a bus rolled by, pushing back the night a notch. You will not ask permission to exist, she whispered. You will exist as your natural right. Across the city, where glass towers mirrored themselves in the river, the world ran by a different logic. Kestrel Biopharma made ABC7 Chicago's evening news. Stock up, glycostat, breakthrough. Young, ambitious CEO Julian Kestrel smiling on screen, chin tilted at an angle Folake knew by heart. That man, that posture, that smile had once convinced her. Now it only conjured a blade. Change it, Nike called from the kitchen. Don't let him in our house. Folake pressed the button, switching to a replay of a jazz concert at the Green Mill. Saxophone curves filled the cramped living room. She exhaled, lighter. At night, she opened tax manuals. Lines from IRS publication 17 marched under her eyes like rows of soldiers. The Nigerian church community helped her secure a small scholarship enough to cover an introductory accounting course at Kennedy King College. The instructor, a black woman with a warm voice, asked why she was studying accounting. Because numbers don't betray, she said, and because I need to understand the language of power. The instructor nodded. Good. When you speak their language, they have to listen. In class, Folake was the oldest, bringing her baby. Zola sat unusually still for a child, eyes roaming as if taking notes on invisible paper. Sometimes she smiled at the fluorescent lights. The younger students teased, "The baby is the soul of our class." Folake smiled, warmth blooming in a hard-to-name corner of her heart. 2 years, then 3. At 2, Zola counted to 10 in Yoruba. At 3, she sounded out letters on cereal boxes at the grocery where her mother worked. She didn't play with dolls at daycare, she lined them up like a courtroom. Those who leave will be questioned, Zola said with solemnity, which made the sitter laugh, hand and shivering, not knowing why. One afternoon, as snow drifted, Folake took Zola to the Hall Branch Library, where Langston Hughes and Gwendolyn Brooks once read. Inside, warmth and old book smell welcomed them. Zola tugged her mother's hand, pointing at a book with the scales of justice on the cover. Mom, what's this? Justice, Folake said, lifting her to touch the cover. The scale that measures right and wrong. One day, you'll hold it. Zola considered. Is it heavy? Very, Nike said, appearing from behind the stacks. She'd stopped by after her shift. But your hands will be strong enough. They went home. Zola slept clutching a borrowed book, refusing to let go. Outside, the snow lay like a new carpet. Inside, the warmth of the stove and the even breathing of 2 sisters and a child redrafted the future skyline with fine, thread-like lines. Lines running through poverty, long nights, and the name Kestrel like passing a neon sign that no longer lit. Then came Zola's first day of first grade at Doolittle Elementary. The budget uniform white shirt, dark pants was a bit too big, as if she were wearing the future ahead of time. Her lunchbox, bought at a thrift store by Nike, had a US map. "Bring back a new story, okay?" Nike winked. At the school gate, there were glances, some friendly, some judgmental, some simply curious, like every school gate in every neighborhood. A mother eyed Folake's gilet, flicking from scarf to skin to Zola, then turned away. Some prejudices go unspoken, but she heard them. She chose not to react. Her straight back was answer enough. That afternoon, Miss Patterson stopped Folake in the hall. "She's very different," she said. Folake tightened her hand, ready for the kind of different that meant difficulty. "Different in a good way," Miss Patterson smiled. "Zola reads smoothly and argues with reasoning when I test her. She's a star." The word star made Folake chuckle, remembering the little star carved into that first crib. "Thank you," she said. "There's a program inviting a judge to speak. I want Zola to meet him. I think she'll like it." "Like it," Zola said from below. She'd been listening the whole time. "And I have a question for the judge." She looked up. "Why are rich people allowed to tell poor people to self-adjust?" Miss Patterson hesitated, then smiled sadly. "That's a grown-up question, Zola." "I'm a grown-up inside," Zola said, patting her chest. "Only outside I'm not grown yet." One rainy afternoon, mother and daughter sheltered under a bus stop awning. Wind drove the rain into threads. A man in a sleek coat eyed a Bentley gliding by. "Wish I had that," he muttered. "Bad wish," Zola said evenly. "Oh? Why bad?" "Because Mom says any wish someone else pays for in blood is bad." Zola held out a hand to catch the rain, voice innocent. "Nice car, but it might drive on tears." The man fell quiet. Folake turned to correct her. "He's a stranger," but the words stuck in her throat. Some things children say need no correction. They need to be kept. On Christmas Eve, the church overflowed, candles flickering, the choir singing Silent Night. Nike sat in the middle, Zola on her lap, Folake beside her. At sleep in heavenly peace, Zola tilted her head and whispered, "I'm sleeping in my own peace." "Yes," Folake said. "No matter the noise." On their way out, they found Mrs. Jenkins waiting on the steps. "Package for you," she said, handing over a brown box with no return address, only a name, Folake Adebayo Rodo. They opened it at home. Inside, a white envelope, 10 crisp $100 bills, and a handwritten note. "Don't sue, just live," Nike whistled. "He thinks he can buy our silence with $1,000. She held the note up to the light. "Whose handwriting?" Folake looked, lips pressed. Not Julian's. Neat, very administrative. Maybe an assistant. She didn't know. But she knew something else. Someone was afraid. And fear sends signals like headlamps revealing position. "We keep it," Nike said. "Buy a heater, milk. Buy life." "No," Folake shook her head. "We'll deposit it into Zola's savings. If we use it right, money born of fear will feed courage." Nike lifted her eyes, slowly smiling. Future queen of accounting. Folake laughed, this time a real laugh, bright as a piece of jazz breaking into a long night. Some days were very long. Nights when Zola spiked a fever, vomited, and cried. The janitorial shift could not be skipped. Nike paced the living room with her niece, singing Orin Ayore Otio, while Folake gripped a rag, hands shaking but refusing to stop. At such times, she remembered her mother in Lagos, the smell of warm rain on red earth, and her mother's words, "Rain doesn't ask if the roof is ready. It falls. Your work is to patch leaks and light fires." When Zola's fever broke and she slept deeply, they looked at each other, eyes red, hands cold, back still straight. Bronzeville breathed outside in distant sirens, the green line rattling the window panes, young men practicing footwork under the eaves. This city had its own way of hardening people, and toughness was the first step toward freedom. One March afternoon, Miss Patterson hurried out of the school gate. "Good news," she said, breathless. "Tomorrow, Judge Theo Brennan of the Northern District of Illinois will speak at school. I want Zola to ask the first question. What will you ask? Folake asked. Zola tilted her head, black eyes scraping an invisible whiteboard. I'll ask about time, she said. If someone steals something, but the victim doesn't know for years, does time take the bad person's side? Or is every month they get paid from that? Wrong. Another new wrong. Nike snorted. Ask a federal judge that and you'll cause a traffic jam in his brain. Kid, then I'm good. Zola shrugged. After Nike and Zola had fallen asleep that night, Folake sat alone. She brought out the evidence box and laid the papers on the table like arranging a chessboard. Each document is a piece. Each number is a move. Each raised seal is a brick wall. She pictured a red thread connecting it all. From the delivery room at Prentice to a boardroom on Lake Shore, from Bradley's seal to Kestrel Biopharma's press releases, from the anonymous $1,000 to the look in Zola's eyes when she asked about justice, she wrote 4 large words on a blank sheet. No haste, no forgetting. Then, smaller, justice is a marathon. She turned off the light, leaving the numbers to sleep. Outside, the snow was gone. Only a light rain veiled the city. Somewhere, in a glass tower, Julian Kestrel was probably toasting shareholders. Here, in an old apartment, a mother was lifting a future. The next morning, Zola sat in the 3rd row of the school's multipurpose room, part auditorium, part gym, smelling of basketballs, polished wood, and floor cleaner. Judge Brennan stepped onto the stage. Silver hair, kind eyes, the smile of a man who had seen every variation of cruelty and grace. He spoke about the Constitution, rights and duties, and how the law isn't always just, but it's the best path toward it. When he asked, "Any questions?" a small hand shot up straight and steady. "Me," Zola's voice rang clear. Heads turned. He nodded. "Go ahead." Zola stood. "Sir," she said, "if someone used a fake signature to take another person's money on the day that person almost died, and kept it secret for years, does time make it less wrong? Or is every month they receive money from that wrong a new wrong?" The room swallowed its breath. Judge Brennan looked at the girl. His gaze shifted from surprise to focus, to respect. "What's your name?" he asked. "Zola Adebayo Atiu." He nodded slowly. "En excellente question. The answer is that every time they receive money, the law can treat it as a new act. Time doesn't wash guilt clean. It waits for the right person to name it." Zola sat, eyes shining not from sentiment, but from something else, certainty. Folake put a hand to her chest in the back row, feeling her heart strike a strange new beat. Nike whispered, "The kid picked her career." After the talk, Judge Brennan walked down the rows and stopped before Zola. "What do you read?" he asked. "IRS reports and books about trade agreements." Zola answered softly, as if stating a normal fact. He laughed, not mocking. "Would you like to come to my court on Saturday? I'll show you what justice looks like when leather soles cross stone floors." Zola looked to her mother. Folake looked to her daughter. Before she nodded, the child had already nodded. That afternoon, they walked home along Martin Luther King Drive. Sunlight slanted across muraled walls, Harriet Tubman leading children, Gwendolyn Brooks at a window, Nat King Cole smiling beneath an old sign. Zola walked between them, a hand in each of theirs. "Can I be a judge?" she asked. "You can be anything," Nike said, never breaking stride. "No, I mean, regardless of who I am now," Zola persisted. "Because someone said girls don't build legacies." Folake stopped and knelt to eye level. That was a wrong man. Women build houses, streets, whole futures. Sometimes their names just don't get carved on the gate. Zola nodded, as if jotting that down somewhere in her mind. "Then I'll carve Mom's name." The wind lifted Folake's gelée. For a moment, she saw not Chicago, not Julian, not nights scrubbing floors or stacks of bills. She saw a long road paved with law books leading to a high-ceilinged courtroom where her daughter stood tall, hand steady on the scales, eyes unblinking. That night, when the city had calmed, Nike brought a small box from the cupboard. "A gift," she said, "for both of you." Inside was an old fountain pen, silver nib, indigo barrel. "Mom's?" Nike said, voice dipping. She used this to sign her first contract when she joined the foreign ministry in Lagos. Now, we sign new contracts with ourselves. 1. You'll read numbers like poetry. 2. Zola, you'll write your name on judgments of justice. Falaki touched the nib and felt a chill spring down her spine. Mother would laugh out loud, she said, then scold us for letting it sit so long. Nike shrugged. She knows we've been busy, patching leaks and lighting fires. They placed the pen in the evidence box beside Julian's papers like setting a seed of light in the dark. Chicago didn't grow any warmer that night, but the small apartment did. Not from the heater, but from the sense that an ice field was being cleared. Saturday morning, they arrived at the Dirksen Federal Building sharp at 8. The building was glass and steel, cold but transparent. Judge Brennan appeared with 2 hot coffees for Zola and Nike and a black coffee for Falake. The law needs caffeine, he joked, and warm hearts. He led them into an empty courtroom. The acoustics rang like a church. Zola climbed onto the jury box, eyes wide. This place sounds like where voices travel far, she said. Exactly, Brennan said, eyes bright, and also where silence is often the loudest. He showed Zola the Clark station, explained each role, talked about due process, the burden of proof, and how sometimes justice is slow not because it's lazy, but because it's careful. Zola nodded, frowned, asked more, poking at the edges of concepts as if testing for strength. Brennan answered plainly, without condescension or oversimplification. He knew who he was speaking to, not a child, but a mind pitching a tent in the country of hard questions. At the end, Brennan handed Zola a small black notebook. My juror's notebook, he said. I filled 10 of these. This one is for you to start. Zola hugged it and looked to her mother. Falake nodded. Nike gave a low whistle. Zola wrote her first line on the cover with the indigo pen. Day 1. Justice is a marathon. Below it is, I will not ask permission to exist. 10 years after that night at the Dirksen Federal Building, Chicago had changed. Bronzeville had sprouted more small cafes and fresh murals, but the honk of cars, the wail of sirens, and the rush of footsteps kept its own rhythm. The desk lamp in a 7th-floor apartment on South King Drive still burned late into the night. No longer bills and scrub rags like before, but law books, case files, and a well-worn indigo fountain pen were on the table. Zola, now 17, closed Black's Law Dictionary and stretched her shoulders. The wall was crowded with certificates, Illinois State Debate Champion, a full-ride scholarship to Harvard on the horizon, and an article published in a student legal journal. Under the desk sat an old shoebox, her mother's evidence box still in its place, but now stuffed with many folders Zola herself had gathered. Nike knocked and came in, holding a box of Popeyes. Little warrior, take a break. The federal code isn't going anywhere. Zola gave a thin smile, opening the box but not letting go of the file in her hand. I'm threading the red line, Auntie. They look like scraps, but everything circles back to one point. Julian, Nike said, without a trace of hesitation. Zola looked up, black eyes flashing under the desk lamp. Julian. People call him the architect of Kestrel Biopharma, but in truth, he's just a thief in an expensive suit, and I have proof. Nike sat, propping her chin on her hand. You're feeding a fire, Zola, but you need to know fire can burn the hand that holds it. I'm not afraid, Zola said, firm. Mom used to say, rain doesn't ask whether the roof is ready. It just falls. Our job is to patch leaks and light fires. I'm ready to be the roof. And this fire isn't only mine. It belongs to Mom, to you, to everyone he took from while no one was looking. A week later, the Harvard Club of Chicago hosted a reception for incoming students. The hall was hung with red banners bearing the word Veritas. Amid the wealthy teens in Ralph Lauren blazers, Zola walked in wearing a simple black dress, head held high. She felt the curious glances, her skin, her hair, the name Adebayor Odeon on her badge. The organizer introduced the guest of honor, a Harvard alumnus, CEO, and pharmaceutical billionaire, Zola Kestrel. Zola felt the room hold its breath. Salt and pepper hair, deep blue suit, he stepped to the podium with the same TV smile, confidence bordering on arrogance. Harvard gave me everything. Knowledge, a network, and a legacy, Julian said, his voice fitting the room as if it belonged to it. I hope the new generation will build on that foundation. Zola tightened her grip on her water glass. From a distance, he didn't recognize her. To him, she was just one among hundreds of young faces, but Zola looked up and saw each crease around his mouth, etched not by wisdom, but by accumulated deceit. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. It was only a flicker, but Zola caught a slight blink, not recognition, but the instinctive alertness of a man who has done wrong. Nike whispered in her ear, "One day you'll stand at that podium, but to tell the truth." Zola nodded. "That day will come. I'll make him sit below and listen." In autumn, Harvard Yard lay under a carpet of gold leaves. Zola walked through the main gate with the small black notebook Judge Brennan had given her in her bag. On the first page, beneath the old line, "Justice is a marathon," there was now a new one. "The day I face Julian, I will no longer be the abandoned child. I will be the prosecutor." In the small Bronzeville apartment, Folake lit a candle and placed her hand on the evidence box. She whispered, "The flame has been passed on, and this time it won't go out." The gray stone building of the Cook County Courthouse rose in the heart of Chicago, its thick walls steeped in the breath of thousands of trials. For most people, this was the place of divorces, land disputes, and street crime. But for Zola Adebayo, today it was the first battlefield, the place she would look straight into the eyes of the man who had denied his own blood 20 years ago. She wasn't the lead attorney on this case, only an intern at Sterling and Brennan LLP. But when managing partner Gabriel Sterling handed her the thick case file, his eyes gleamed. "This is the divorce case of his wife, Morgana Kestrel. And guess who the respondent is?" Zola didn't need to guess. Just hearing the name Kestrel made her heartbeat pound. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice steadier than her emotions. "Financial analysis. You have a particular talent for numbers and money trails. If there's anything irregular, I want you to be the first to spot it." Zola nodded. Her hand trembled slightly as she took the file. The cold numbers in those spreadsheets weren't just figures. To her, they were bloodstains, wounds, and betrayal stretched across 2 decades. The next morning, courtroom 7 was packed. Morgana sat at the petitioner's table in a pearl-colored Chanel dress, her face tense but carefully made up. Beside her sat Gabriel Sterling, an assistant. Julian Kestrel sat upright at the respondent's table in an Armani suit and dark red tie. His expression remained confident, even curling into a smirk when he caught the press cameras. When the clerk called the case, Zola entered, carrying an armful of files. She took her seat behind Gabriel at the support table. No one noticed until Julian looked up. His eyes met her face. For a second, Julian froze. A familiar vision slammed into him. The eyes of his mother, of his grandmother, and of the woman he had abandoned on a hospital bed years ago. He blinked, forcing it away, turning back to his lawyer. But in that fleeting moment, Zola saw everything. Recognition. The hearing began. Gabriel argued, "We have evidence that Mr. Kestrel concealed assets in multiple shell companies, while also using marital funds to pay for extramarital affairs." Objection. Cromwell, Julian's attorney, shot up. "This case concerns marital dissolution, not corporate finance." Judge Williams, a silver-haired woman with eyes sharp as blades, struck her gavel. Objection overruled. In divorce, assets are central. Zola rose at Gabriel's signal and switched on the projector. Charts appeared. Shell companies in Delaware, Cayman accounts, millions in unaccounted transactions. Her voice rang clear and steady. Based on transaction data from 2003, the capital flow shows that the initial $10 million of Kestrel Biopharma did not originate from an investment fund as Mr. Kestrel claimed, but from personal assets unlawfully withdrawn from the inheritance account of Mrs. Folake Adebayo, Kestrel, his former wife. The courtroom fell into dead silence. Julian shot to his feet, face flushing. Who is she to dare? "Sit down, Mr. Kestrel," the judge barked. Zola lifted her head, eyes locking on Julian's, her voice unwavering. "I am Zola Adebayo, daughter of Folake. the child you abandoned on the day of her birth. And today, I am here to remind you that truth does not die with silence. A ripple of shock tore through the courtroom. Morgana covered her mouth. Reporters' fingers flew across keyboards. Cromwell stammered, "Objection. This is irrelevant. This is..." But Julian was paralyzed. He stared at the young woman before him, the eyes, stance, and presence, as if the past had returned to collect its debt. Gabriel gently touched Zola's shoulder, signaling her to sit. He continued, "As you can see, this financial fraud was the foundation of the entire corporation. And now, it is the foundation of this divorce." Yet in that moment, even as the lawyer's words echoed across the courtroom, only two pairs of eyes remained locked. Father and daughter, the abandoner and the abandoned. Julian's lips moved, soundless. "Impossible," Zola whispered, just enough for him to hear. "Believe it. The day you feared most has begun." That night, the 48th floor of Kestrel Tower, a glittering glass skyscraper on the shore of Lake Michigan, was bathed in the blue glow of city lights. In a bedroom as large as a hotel suite, Morgana Kestrel sat alone before the mirror. A half-empty glass of red wine trembled in her hand, and mascara smeared at the corners of her eyes. On the table lay the file she had just taken from court, and a scrap of paper scrawled with words, "Zola Adebayor CO2, daughter of Fola K, Yale Law, the one who brought the truth to light." Morgana read the note over and over, as if hypnotized. She had heard whispers about the first wife of Julian, about a baby girl who did not exist, but Julian had always laughed them off. "Nonsense, darling. Don't listen to jealous nobodies." Yet today, in that courtroom, the girl had stood there cold as a blade, laying bare the numbers. And Julian's eyes, Morgana had never seen him so afraid. The door opened. Asher, Morgana's only son, stepped inside. He wore his Columbia ROTC uniform, his posture proud, but his eyes carried sorrow. "I heard the news," he said, voice low and controlled. Morgana quickly wiped the smeared mascara, forcing a smile. "Just theatrics, Asher. That girl. She only wanted to humiliate Julian." Asher moved closer, setting down a photocopied document. "Blood test results from when he was 16. Mother, it's time to tell the truth." "Morgana Pallet. You know? I've known for a long time. I'm O negative. You're a positive. Julian is AB positive. Biologically, that's impossible." Asher locked eyes with her. "Julian isn't my father, is he?" The wineglass slipped from Morgana's hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. She covered her face, sobbing. "It's true. Your father is Dimitri Castellanos, the yoga instructor back then. I was wrong. But Julian wanted to believe, and I let him believe." Asher exhaled heavily. He had suspected, had known, but hearing his mother confess was still a knife twisting deep. "That's why Julian has always been disappointed in me. Because I'm not like him." "No, my son." Morgana clutched his hand, her voice trembling. "He's disappointed because you're not ruthless. Because you have a heart. That's the real reason." Outside the glass wall, Chicago's lights blazed. But inside, mother and son sat in the shadows of a secret that had rotted for 20 years. "Asher," Morgana whispered, "do you know about Zola, the girl, Falake's daughter? I've been following her. She's more capable than anyone Julian ever wanted. Brilliant, sharp, but full of justice." Asher clenched his fist. "She's the enemy he can't buy, can't intimidate, and because of that, she's our hope." Morgana lifted her head, tears shining, but a spark flickering in her gaze. "You mean?" "I'll reach out to her. Not to fight Julian for you, but to fight Julian for everyone he's destroyed." Morgana hesitated, then nodded. For the first time in years, something long hidden beneath wine and makeup surfaced in her eyes. Resolve. That night, when Julian came home, reeking of whiskey, Morgana was waiting in the living room, her eyes unnervingly clear. "Why are you still up?" Julian snapped. "Tomorrow we hold a press conference. I'll handle today's circus. The press won't believe that silly girl." Morgana looked at him, her voice low but sharp. "Julian, do you even know who that girl is?" Just some nobody trying to get famous off my name. No, that was Zola, Folak's daughter. Your daughter. Julian froze, the whiskey glass tipped in his hand. Impossible. You looked into her eyes. You know the truth. In that moment, Julian, the man who had once terrified the pharmaceutical market, trembled. He hurled the glass to the floor, shattering it. No, that was an illusion. Folake is gone. That girl doesn't exist to me. Morgana rose, retreating toward the staircase. Keep lying to yourself if you want. But know this. The day Zola stood before you in court was only the beginning. And this time, I won't shield you. Julian stared after his wife, fear flashing in his eyes. This time, an old nightmare had returned with a face, a voice, and the law at its back. 3 a.m. The University of Chicago Law Library was silent, broken only by the rustling of pages and keys tapping. On the second floor, in a corner flooded with warm yellow light, Zola Adebayorodea sat surrounded by files like a warrior in the middle of a battlefield. On her laptop screen, dozens of spreadsheets stretched across, their dry numbers connected by red threads pinned to the corkboard behind her. A massive financial map took shape, not of Chicago's streets, but a labyrinth of shell companies, trusts, and Cayman accounts. Zola froze at one figure, $10 million, December 2002. She zoomed in on the transaction, her hand gripping the mouse tight. There it is, she whispered. That was the day her mother lay on the operating table at Prentice Women's Hospital, hovering between life and death. On that day, her inheritance from her grandfather, the Nigerian diplomat, vanished from the account. And 1 month later, Kestrel Biopharma was founded, with the same 10 million initial capital. The library door creaked. Gabriel Sterling stepped inside, sleeves rolled up, tie loose. He looked at Zola, his eyes caught between pride and worry. You're still here. Normal people sleep, but you're tracing blood money. This isn't money. It's a curse. Zola's voice was as cold as steel. He built his empire on my mother's blood. Gabriel sat down, gazing at the screen. So you have proof? Zola nodded. Enough to turn the divorce trial into a nuclear bomb. Once exposed, he won't just lose money. He'll lose his reputation, his freedom. The FBI won't be able to look away. She opened a file, a scanned copy of the power of attorney with her mother's forged signature, dated the 15th of December 2002, the very moment Folake was unconscious after giving birth. Look at this signature, Zola pointed out. Not even close. Crude, rushed. He thought my mother would never dare to fight. But now her daughter will do it for her. Gabriel stayed silent for a while, then asked softly, Zola, how long have you been preparing for this day? She gave a faint smile. Since I was 7, the day I found that wedding photo with half the face cut off. From that moment, I promised myself that he would have to hear me speak one day, and this time, he can't walk away. Outside, the wind off Lake Michigan rattled the windows. Zola caught her reflection in the darkness, hard eyes, tense shoulders, no longer the abandoned child. This was the image of a future prosecutor, a warrior carrying her mother's name. She opened the black notebook Judge Brennan had once given her. On the final page, written in green ink, Justice is a marathon. Don't run to avenge. Run to reach the finish. Zola whispered, I'll reach the finish line, Your Honor, and I'll take my mother with me. A new email popped up on her screen. Sender, Asher Castellanos, Voss. Subject, I want to talk. About Julian, about Zola. Zola stared at the line, her chest tightening. Julian's son, or the one Julian called his son, was reaching out to her. She took a long breath and opened it. The words appeared, I am not who he thinks I am. I don't carry his blood, but I carry the burden of his lies. I want to stand on the side of truth. If you're willing, we need to meet. A small cafe in Hyde Park, near the University of Chicago campus. November air was crisp, steam rising from cappuccinos like thin fog. Zola chose a table by the window, her back to the wall so she could watch every exit and entrance. That habit, she had learned in her years, shadowing Judge Brennan in court. Right on time, Asher Castellanos Voss walked in. Gone was the crisp ROTC uniform. Now he wore a khaki jacket and a grey scarf. His demeanor seemed calm, but his eyes carried the weariness of someone who had lived too long under the shadow of a father who was never his father. Zola stood and shook his hand. His palm was warm, but the grip was too tight, like clinging to a lifeline. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You're the one who asked to meet, Asher. I want to know, why?" Zola tilted her head, voice steady though her eyes dissected his every move. Saturday, Asher laid a thick manila envelope on the table. "Here are letters, notes, and files from Julian's computer. I've backed them up since I was 18, when I learned the truth about my bloodline." Zola raised an eyebrow. "What do you plan to do with them?" Asher sighed, staring out the window at yellow leaves caught in the wind. "All my life, he treated me like a project. It taught me about hostile takeovers and forced me to read financial reports instead of comics, but he never once looked at me as a person. And then I discovered I didn't carry his blood at all. You know what? I felt relieved, because at least his coldness wasn't because I was useless. It was simply because I had never really belonged." Zola stayed silent, listening. In his eyes, she glimpsed herself two children raised in the absence of love, only on different fronts. One abandoned at birth, the other trapped in the illusion of family. "You want to cooperate?" she asked. Asher nodded. "I'm no longer loyal to him, but I need clarity. What exactly are you after with Julian? Money? Reputation? Or his destruction?" Zola set down her cup, her black eyes drilling into his. "I don't need his money. His reputation was never mine to claim. I only want the truth rewritten that his empire was born from my mother's blood and tears, and if destruction is the only path for truth to live, then I'll go all the way." Asher studied her for a long time, then pushed the envelope across the table. "Then we share the same purpose. You'll find his secret journal, which he calls the Victory Album. He stored photos of your mother mopping floors, hospital bills, even eviction notices, as trophies. I couldn't stomach it when I found it." Zola clenched the envelope, her lips trembling. She had heard whispers, but now there was proof. Her heart twisted, yet her voice remained firm. "You've just chosen the right side of history, Asher." They left the cafe. Outside, night had deepened, and the wind from Lake Michigan was howling. Before parting, Asher turned back. "Zola, if I disappear tomorrow, know that I was ready. He has eyes everywhere. But at least, I told the truth to the one person who deserved to hear it." Zola touched his shoulder, her eyes burning bright. "You will not disappear. This time, we will force him to stand before justice. And you will stand with me." In the darkness, two young figures, one daughter abandoned, one son deceived, tightened their alliance. In that moment, an empire lost two pillars it had always scorned: maternal love and the truth. Courtroom 12 of the Cook County Courthouse was packed. Reporters crowded the hallway, cameras lined up in rows. Today was no longer an ordinary divorce case. This was the day all of Chicago had been waiting for. Julian Kestrel would have to open his financial books before justice. On the plaintiff's bench, Morgana sat with Gabriel Sterling. Beside him was Zola, hair neatly tied back, wearing a simple black suit with eyes burning like fire. In the gallery, Folake was present too, clad in a royal blue Nigerian dress, her gilet wrapped high like a crown. She sat upright, proud-eyed, as if finally witnessing truth washed clean by light. Julian entered. Still the expensive suit, still the cold poise, but his eyes flicked briefly toward Zola and quickly looked away like a man avoiding a mirror that cut down to the bone. Judge Eleanor Williams struck the gavel. "Court is back in session. Mr. Sterling, you may proceed." Gabriel Rose, voice calm. "Your Honor, we have analyzed the financial flows from the founding of Kestrel Biopharma. The results show that the entire initial capital, $10 million, originated from the inheritance account of Mrs. Folake Adebayor Adio, withdrawn illegally on the 15th of December 2002. He gestured. Zola stood and switched on the projector. The large screen displayed the transaction figures, the dates, and the forged power of attorney. "This signature," Zola said, her voice even and resonant, was dated the same day my mother was in a coma after a difficult birth at Prentice Women's Hospital. We have medical records confirming she could not have signed any documents. The courtroom buzzed. Julian's attorney, Cromwell, shot to his feet. Objection. Pure speculation. There is no direct witness. Yes, their island. A new voice rang out. The courtroom doors opened, and Julian's former lawyer, Bradley Stevenson, stepped in. He was trembling, but his eyes burned with resolve. I was the witness when Zola Kestrel forged that document. He told me to stay silent and called it a technical procedure. I have kept the secret for 20 years, but can no longer. Julian slammed the table, face flushed red. Traitor. Judge Williams banged the gavel. Order. Zola continued, her voice like steel. But that is not all. With the stolen money, Mr. Kestrel developed the insulin drug Insulux. We also have evidence that his company deliberately hiked the price by 0%, making it unreachable for poor patients. At least 17 people died from cutting doses. She clicked the remote. The screen filled with photos of victims: an elderly Chinese woman from Chinatown, a 12-year-old black boy from the South Side, a Mexican mother from Pilsen. Below each, the death certificate read, "Complications of diabetes, insufficient insulin." Sobs broke out across the room. Some relatives of the victims rose, shouting across the barrier, "Murderer!" Just then, the rear doors burst open. 2 FBI agents in black suits entered, flashing badges. "Apologies, Your Honor. We have just received a federal warrant. Evidence shows that Zola Kestrel is involved in money laundering and pharmaceutical market manipulation. We request his immediate arrest in court." The atmosphere exploded like a bomb. Reporters shouted. Cameras flashed wildly. Julian leapt up, roaring, "It's all lies. That girl, she's not my daughter. She's just an imposter trying to destroy me." Zola stood tall, eyes blazing. "I am Zola Adebayo Rodio. You may deny me, but you cannot deny the truth. Today, the truth has spoken, and it will not be silenced again." The FBI cuffed Julian. He struggled, casting one last glance at Folake. But she did not cry, did not tremble. She only stared straight back, with the serenity of someone who knew justice had returned after 2 decades. Zola sat down, her heart pounding. In her mind echoed Judge Brennan's words, "Justice is a marathon." And today, she knew, she had just crossed the first sprint. Chicago's sky was gray as lead. 6 a.m., FBI helicopters churned above, rotors slicing the air. On the ground, convoys of armored vehicles stormed simultaneously into 17 sites from Kestrel Biopharma headquarters in the West Loop to the Michigan Lakeside Mansion to a warehouse in Joliet's outskirts. The news went live. CNN's ticker blazed red. Kestrel Pharma monopoly raided. Suspected mass murder. At Brennan and Sterling's office, Zola stood by the window, gripping a coffee cup she had forgotten to drink. Every time the screen showed FBI agents raiding, it felt as if another chain from her past fell away. Gabriel approached, setting a thick file before her. "You did it, but brace yourself. What they uncover may be worse than we imagined." Reports poured in immediately. Joliet warehouse. An underground surgical suite. Medical records of hundreds of undocumented patients. Traces of an organ trafficking network. Company headquarters. Servers holding internal emails. Julian referring to patients as liabilities and writing, "Insulin pricing equals natural selection." Michigan mansion. A basement lined with hundreds of framed photos. Faces of women, children, and older people victims of inflated drug prices. On the back of each photo, Julian had scrawled one word: victory. Zola stared at the screen, eyes wet but no tears falling. "He kept pictures of my mother, even when she scrubbed floors, even her hospital bills, as trophies." Folake sat quietly in the corner. She wore a white Nigerian dress, her face composed, and her hands trembled faintly. After so many years, she saw clearly that Julian was not merely cruel, he had built an entire warped creed, turning suffering into proof of power. At that moment, Asher appeared with a USB drive. "I kept this as insurance. Now it's time to release it. Zola plugged it in. In his private office, a video played. Julian teaching young Asher. His voice rang cold. You must understand, there are two kinds of people. Those who spend money on medicine and sell it to get rich. You belong to the second kind. If a few children die, that's necessary selection. The room fell silent. Asher lowered his head, ashamed and furious. He never wanted me to be human. He only wanted me to become a replica of the monster. Zola placed a hand on his shoulder. No, you chose to be a witness. And that is something Julian never counted on. That same day, Wall Street panicked. Kestrel Biopharma's stock plummeted 87% in a single morning. International partners cancelled contracts. The entire board of directors resigned. Julian could only watch on TV from his federal jail cell as the name Kestrel vanished from the Wall Street ticker. He screamed, pounding the bars. It was mine. All of it was mine. The press called it Farmer's Black Tuesday, but for Zola and her mother, it was the day truth was carved into history. Folake whispered as she held her daughter tight. You reclaimed not just money, but the souls of those he despised. Zola closed her eyes, listening to her mother's steady heartbeat. After 22 years, they were no longer merely survivors. They were witnesses and judgment itself. Chicago Federal Detention Center, temporary holding unit. The interrogation room was cold, lit only by a hanging bulb and a scarred metal table. The sound of the lock turning echoed like a hammer striking the heart. Zola entered. Her black suit was immaculate, the sapphire blue ring on her hand an heirloom from Julian's mother gleaming under the harsh yellow light. Across from her, Julian Kestrel sat with his head lowered, wrists chained. A faded orange jumpsuit had replaced the Armani suit that once made him stand out. He looked up, his eyes still cold but cracked for the first time. You came to savor your victory, girl. Zola sat, not rushing to reply. She studied the man who had haunted her childhood, not the proud CEO anymore, but an older man, skin wrinkled, eyes hollow, an empire rotted down into a single body. No, Zola answered, voice steady and low. I came to look you straight in the eye, to make sure you know the one you deemed worthless is the one who pulled you down. Julian let out a hoarse, bitter laugh. You're more like me than you think. Cold, calculating, unflinching when striking others down. Zola leaned forward, gaze sharp as a blade. Wrong. You struck to feed your ego. I strove to restore justice. We share patience, but not purpose. Julian snarled, eyes bloodshot. If you had been a son, everything would have been different. I would have given you everything. Zola smirked faintly. You're mistaken. If I had been a son, you would have raised me to be your replica, a cruel man painted with success. Because I was a daughter, I learned to stand on my own. Because you abandoned me, I became someone you cannot defeat. Julian slammed his chained hand on the table, the cuffs clattering. You'll regret this. Everything I built, you only destroyed. No one remembers the destroyer. They only remember the builder. Zola leaned in closer, voice dropping, each word cutting like ice. You weren't a builder. You were a thief. You stole my mother's money. You stole patients' lives. You stole even your own son's childhood. People will remember Julian Kestrel as a warning. No empire can stand on injustice. And I, the daughter you threw away, will be the living proof. A heavy silence fell. Julian turned his face aside, his shoulders trembling, unclear whether from rage or fear. Zola rose, adjusting her jacket. Before leaving, she looked back, voice firm. You once said I was worthless. Look around, who is chained now, and who walks out free? I am not your legacy. I am my mother's legacy, and that is the only difference that matters. The cell door closed behind her, leaving Julian alone in the dim light, surrounded by the echo of mistakes that could never be undone. Outside, winter had come to Chicago. Zola stepped out of the prison gates, inhaling a long breath of icy wind, feeling the decades-long weight finally lift from her chest. Across the street, Folake waited, her eyes radiant with pride. They clasped hands, and for the first time, Zola felt it clearly. Julian Kestrel's final chapter had closed. But the story of the Adebayo Ruddy family had only just begun.